Hello. So sorry, I just got in. I didn't see you there. Is there something I can help you with? Something particular that you're looking for today? Well, you are in fact in the correct location. The library and museum here has quite a lot of information regarding ancient Egypt, and I like to think of myself as a bit of an expert, so you've come at the perfect time. Alright. Of course. So you've brought some symbols of sorts that you wanted to know more about. Wonderful. Well, my name is Evie. And yours? Alright, so go ahead, let me see what exactly you have brought to me. As long as it's no sort of Book of the Dead or anything, I would be happy to translate or tell you what particular symbols look like. Oh, it's a long story. Alright, so let me have a look here. Alright, so I can see that you've already labelled some of these particular hieroglyphs and or symbols. Oh, that's perfect. Doing a bit of research on your own is wonderful when you're looking to learn something new, especially something as fascinating as ancient Egypt. Alright, so let me see. How many symbols do we have here? Luckily these are very familiar symbols, so we won't have to do any sort of research or anything, and on the look of it I don't see anything that would be worrisome or create any sort of mummy situations of sort. I can't do that again, I'm too tired. Oh, like I said, long story, and I've promised my husband that we wouldn't do that again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's about 14 symbols that we're going to be looking over today. Alright, Anubis, Horus, ankh, I have Horus, scarab, thrown down, give. Alright, so is there anything in particular that you really want to know about these symbols, or how are they used in particular hieroglyphs, or is it just a basic description then? Alright. Well, I've been studying ancient Egypt since I was a child, so as I said, you've come to the right person. My mother was actually Egyptian, so I like to think I'm finishing some of her work, and I've had quite a few adventures. Right. You've heard my name. Oh, well, most of it is just talk, I show you. So let's go ahead and start. If we'll just lay this here between us and go over. So starting out, let's go ahead with the Eye of Horus, which is usually pretty well known within Egyptian symbols. Of course, the Eye of Horus is in ancient Egyptian symbol, as are most of these. But this particular symbol is a symbol of protection. You will see it quite often on pyramid walls or different things, tombs even, for protection. It also may represent royal power and even good health. So the Eye of Horus here is a pretty good one to start with if you're just beginning your studies on ancient Egypt. It's a good one to know, and it's a good starting point because there are others that resemble the Eye of Horus but aren't exactly it. So it's good to be able to tell the difference. Right, so moving on here. Right, so here we have Shinu or Shen, depending on which particular symbol you're talking about. Right, so yes, this one right here. You may find it to be facing different directions as well, so that can sometimes relate to the difference. Shinu, Sen, to encircle. Shen, Sen, or Shen ring means to encircle, which you can kind of relate to this particular symbol here. You can see how it could relate to the circle. This particular symbol, of course, can relate to infinity and eternity, as many people in ancient civilizations would relate the circle to never-ending life, so eternity. Infinity, whether that be in this living life here or the afterlife, depends on everyone's particular belief system. But you can kind of remember that with the ring and the circle and for its meaning if you're trying to study and remember the meaning of these here. And you can see that there's the variety here, but mean very similar things. So slight differences that you will have to take into consideration when you're studying anything truly, but especially ancient symbols of this nature. Yeah, so this one here is the ankh symbol, another really popular one that you may see come up in a lot of your various studies. So it does kind of have the resemblance of a cross, but once again looping in that circle at the top of this symbol. This one here can represent the key of life, the symbol of life, and so on. So it lots of potential representations, but it's always going to partially relate to the circle of life and things relating to life in general. I do have an artifact here that you can take note of. That is the symbol, ankh symbol here. So you can see very cross-like with the circle on the top, circle of life if you will. It's representing of life and things that would relate to life in general. And sometimes you'll find embellishments like this purple jewel here. Other times it will just be the standard symbol. As you have here on your document here, it's pretty standard, but this one could add a little bit of sparkle. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to your next symbol that you've brought me. So the Anubis, another very well-known symbol, especially when you're talking about tombs and things of that nature. So the Anubis, one of its meanings is the god of mummification. You may know that for ancient Egypt, the mummification process was very, very delicate and very important. Yes, we should just leave them how they are and don't bring them back and things of that nature, because it's very tiring to have to deal with ancient mummies and orphans like an oxygen and things of that nature. But don't mind me, I'm rambling. So the Anubis. The Anubis, you will find, is also the god of the afterlife, so it would make sense that the afterlife here and the mummification process, which most of the time took place when the person was deceased, but I'm afraid not all the time. That's a completely different story that I'm sure you'll get into in your studies. But the god Anubis of mummification and the afterlife. Afterlife is very, very important, and keeping mummies in the afterlife, I would suggest, is very, very important as well. You may also find here that the Anubis is the patron god of lost souls or the helpless. So that could relate to the afterlife, a lost soul within the afterlife, or depending on how exactly they were mummified. If it was not a pleasant experience, they could in turn be a lost soul within that afterlife, and the Anubis would guide them in that way. Of course, a lot of people would relate the Anubis to a darker symbol or creature, but I don't particularly see it that way. It's just part of the living and dying process, and then the Anubis takes you on to the afterlife. So, yes. Alright, any questions so far? Alright, well, we've done the Eye of Horus, the Shin, Ankh, Anubis. Let's go ahead and move forward with the rest of your symbols here. Right, so we have the waltz, or lots of times it's referred to as the wall's spectre. Yes, so it's good to know that sometimes it's abbreviated into the shorter version, and sometimes you need to include the spectre, which is very, very important to remember. So this is an important symbol of power, dominion over the gods, the variety of gods, of course, this particular spectre is. This symbol here also ensured a king's power. So really showing someone's power within history, not just over, the living, but they have classified the dominion over the gods as well. So they took power very seriously, if you will. Then we're moving on to the bar symbol here, which is a very beautiful symbol if you look at it. So this particular symbol oftentimes is related to the heavenly spirit while still remaining the human personality, if you will. So many people would say that this is your spirit in the afterlife, and or your soul after death. So it has bits of both, your spirit self and the human personality that still remains from your living life. Yes, a lot of these have to do with the life and the afterlife and things of that nature, but a lot of different civilizations has that, so it's not too uncommon. Yes, alright. And this next one here is pretty straightforward. It would just represent a town or a location. So if they're trying to tell a story, or put the particular location of Hominotra, things like that, they might use that symbol, which is kind of like a circle and a cross, to pinpoint where something would be. No, of course not. Hominotra isn't a real place. Just read that within your studies. There's truly no interest in going to find Amenotra, I assure you. So that particular symbol is very straightforward, and you should be able to remember town or location, spot. Okay. Moving on, you have the scarab here. Beastly little things. Don't worry. Of course, I'm not speaking from experience or anything of that nature. So, the symbol of the scarab actually is a little bit different than what I was saying. The scarab may represent immortality, even resurrection, which resurrection within ancient Egypt, it's just, as I was saying, I would highly recommend nothing regarding resurrection or the Book of the Dead or anything of that nature. I know it might sound a little silly, but I'm truly just trying to save you a bit of time. Yeah, so let's avoid resurrection or anything regarding resurrecting mummies or anyone that's been mummified or anything, ancient gods, any of that nature. So the scarab may represent transformation and as well as protection as well. Some paintings and artwork from ancient Egypt, you will find the particular people are wearing scarabs as a form of protection within their wardrobe, their jewellery, their makeup, of course, different things like that. So the scarab can mean a couple different things, whether that be the immortality, resurrection, transformation, protection. Overall, it's seen as a relatively lucky symbol when studying these different things or referencing it in history, or if you were to find anything new in different books or texts. Usually the scarab is seen as lucky, but I've seen some people not have the best time with scarabs. But let's move on to the next symbol here. This one here is another one that is relatively straightforward. The throne, style a throne, so it may represent royalty or different aspects of a reign within ancient Egypt, or pharaohs or things of that nature. But you can see that the symbol looks like a throne. So that should be an easy one to remember. Kind of looks like blocks or something that an ancient pharaoh of sorts would sit upon. So the throne is pretty easy to remember. Then we go on to Ka. So this one could mean life force. Once again, lots of things and symbols to do with life and death, the afterlife and whatever in between. So Ka is no different, means life force. Some people relate Ka to what some people today would consider a ghost. It is said that Ka survived the death of the body, but could still reside in pictures, statues, artwork, even hieroglyphs, if you will. So very spooky. Some people would relate Ka to the more spooky sections of the afterlife, while they survive that death, but still a piece of them remains around us. So that's a good one to memorize. I mean, all of the symbols that you've selected for me today to tell you about are good ones to start with. I know that you're just new to study within ancient Egypt, and you seem to be doing quite well so far. Moving on, so we have Siba here, and you can already tell it looks like a star, right? The Egyptians' connections to knowledge of the stars and the constellations is fascinating. So of course that they would have symbols representing the stars and planets around us. So Siba, shaped like a star. Kind of like a starfish, but it is shaped like a star no less, and represents the different stars that Egyptians would monitor and learn about within their own studies and religion bases and whatnot. It is also believed that the stars, while above us in a literal sense, for ancient Egyptians they believed that the star realm somehow related to the underworld or the afterlife. So everything ties together with that circle of life, living, passing away, mummification, the afterlife, all of that. So yes, when they studied the stars in life, they also thought that they could be part of the afterlife, the darker underworld. So Seba here representing stars. And then we move on to Ra, or the sun. So depending on how deep you go into this particular symbol, it can mean a couple of things, all relating to the sun or the sun god, Horus, things of that nature. So this one is very basic. As you can see, it kind of looks like a little sun, a little circle in the sky that would represent Ra. So it may relate to the sun god, as I said, Horus, god of the sky and the sun, Ra, god of the sun, lots of different opportunities. As you saw, we had Eye of Horus up here, this is just Ra for the sun, or Ra sun god. There's a lot of different possibilities depending on what the full picture is. So you need to be able to tell apart the meaning and the purpose behind today what we would call a sentence, but what they would call their story within their hieroglyphics and whatnot. So it's a fairly basic one, but can of course have a multitude of meanings here. And I believe that is the last of your symbols, is that correct? Let me see. We did Eye of Horus, ankh, Anubis, walls, bar, tower, scarab, throne, cock, Zebra, we did miss here. I don't think we went over this give symbol here, but as it's very straightforward to give things of that nature, gifts within things, or gives. It kind of represents two little triangles here, but other than that, I think we've covered each of the symbols you've brought for me. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Any questions regarding these particular symbols that you've brought to me? I truly just misspoke. There's really no reason for you to research or do any sort of looking into the Book of the Dead. I highly recommend you do not. And for being completely honest, my husband would never speak to me again if I brought in that mess of things once more. So focus. You are very new to your ancient Egypt studies, so please focus here on your symbols. Alright, and who was that you had a question about? That's a lovely one to start with. 1 second. I think I have a book here that I have a book here now. The amount of gods and goddesses and things of that nature. Very lots to learn. But you've got to start somewhere, right? Alright, so here is a good representation of the goddess Isis here. Just set that down here. So Egyptian goddess of health, marriage and wisdom. Isis is to have resurrected her husband Osiris by travelling into the underworld to retrieve his body parts. It's quite beautiful here, you can see. You may find some beautiful artwork within her. And if you look around, you can kind of see some symbols within this image of this goddess as well. You can see the ankh, the life symbol here. Down below you can see the scarab. There's a couple of Horus. You have a more straightforward symbol of the sun and the moon. But that's always a good way to practice learning your symbols as well. If you're looking to learn about some of the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt, just look at some of the imagery and artwork that the goddess or the god may have around them, and you can refer back to your symbols, your notes, hieroglyphs to take reference and kind of help you to study a little more. Alright, so anything else you do need to see or know? I will of course give you that, you can take that home. Alright, well, I'm so glad that I was in today. My schedule's a little up and down these days, but I was happy to answer all of your questions. Alright, well, continue with your studies. Perhaps I will catch you in a few years' time and you will know more about ancient Egypt than I do. Highly unlikely considering what I've experienced, but alright. Please take care now.